You know, usually when we crack open a history book about a religion or a spiritual movement, there's a very clear starting line.
A clear before and after.
Yeah, you get a prophet, a burning bush, a Bodhi tree, a set of golden tablets. You get a specific day one.
A founder who says, here is the new truth.
Exactly. But today, we're diving into a spiritual system that the source material, sacred roots. The evolution of pagan spirituality argues is, well, maybe the default setting for humans.
And yet it has no founder, no central text, no Vatican.
And for most of history, it didn't even have a name.
And when it finally did get a name, it wasn't exactly a compliment. It was more of an insult, really.
We are talking, of course, about paganism. And I know the second I say that word, a lot of listeners are probably picturing something very specific.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe Hollywood witches or, people in robes at Stonehenge or maybe just that goth kid from high school who owned a few too many crystals.
Which is. Look, that's part of the modern picture, absolutely. Yeah. But the source material makes this really bold claim right at the start. It says if you want to understand paganism, you have to stop thinking of it as a religion in the modern sense, like a club with a rule book.
Right.
And start thinking of it as a language.
Yeah.
The language our ancestors use to speak with the world around them.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack how that language evolved, how it was almost erased, and why, according to the data, it's one of the fastest growing spiritual movements in the Western world right now.
It's a fascinating trajectory. I mean, you go from ancient survival instinct to suppressed heresy, and then all the way back to modern identity. To a wild ride.
So let's start with that word, pagan, because I think this was the first big aha moment for me in the reading. I always assumed it was a theological term.
Like heretic or something?
Exactly, someone who believes the wrong thing.
A lot of people do. But the word itself, paganus, it's Latin.
Yeah.
And it's entirely sociological. It doesn't mean evil or devil worshiper.
So what does it mean?
It literally just means villager, rustic, or country dweller.
So it's basically the Roman equivalent of calling someone a hick.
In a sense, yeah. You have to picture the Roman Empire as Christianity started to spread. The new religion was an urban thing.
It spread through cities, trade routes.
Exactly. Antioch, Corinth, Rome itself. If you lived in a city, you were exposed to these new monotheistic ideas. You were on the cutting edge.
But if you were out in the sticks...
If you were out in the rural areas, the pagus,
yeah,
you were kind of off the grid. You held on to the old ways, the local shrines, the harvest festivals, the river gods, not as some big defiant stand, but just...
because that was life.
That was just life. That's how you made sure the crops grew.
So paganism wasn't a group people chose to join. They didn't have, pagan pride parades in 300 AD.
No. Never. It was an exonym, a name given to them by outsiders. It was basically a bucket.
A bucket?
The early church basically said, okay, we have the Christians, and then we have everyone else. So it lumped a Celtic druid, a Norse warrior, an Egyptian priest, and a Greek philosopher all into one category.
That's wild. I mean, those groups had totally different gods, different languages, different rituals.
But to the urban elite, they were all just civilians or country folk who hadn't gotten with the program yet. It was a category of exclusion. Not us.
Okay, so if the word is a later invention, let's talk about the thing itself. The source asks this really interesting question. How did it actually start? If there's no Bible, no Quran, where does the software come from?
It comes from the sky and from the soil.
The observation theory. I loved this section.
It makes perfect sense if you just strip away all our modern tech. Imagine you're an early human, no phone, no grocery store. What is the single most important reality of your life?
Survival. Eating. Not freezing to death.
Right. So you need to know when the herds migrate. You need to know when the frost is coming. So what do? You watch. You notice the sun has a cycle, the moon has a rhythm, the stars move in a pattern.
And the source argues this isn't just primitive science, it's not just data collection, it's that they saw these forces as relational.
That is the key. We tend to look at a river and see H2O flowing downhill.
Yeah.
Physics. An animistic worldview, which is the bedrock of all of this, sees the river as an entity, as a neighbor. It can feed you or it can drown you. It demands respect.
And that's animism. We should probably define that.
Sure. Animism is the belief that personhood isn't just for humans. Trees, stones, storms, animals, they all have agency, they all have a spirit.
Which honestly, if you spend enough time alone in a dense forest, it starts to feel pretty intuitive.
It does. You feel like you're being watched. And that leads directly to polytheism. the belief in many gods.
Yeah.
If the world is full of all these different distinct forces.
You need different names for them.
Exactly. You don't ask the ocean for help with a forest fire. They're different departments.
A divine bureaucracy. I like that.
And because it's based on local observation, it's inherently diverse. That's why we get so many flavors of paganism.
The source calls this place-based spirituality. The land dictates the lore. Let's run through a few examples.
Okay, take Egypt. You've got the Nile, which floods with this incredible regularity. You have the sun, which is intense, reliable, and just dominates everything.
So Egyptian mythology becomes obsessed with order, cosmic balance Ma'at, and the sun god Ra is king.
Now, contrast that with the Norse tradition.
Totally different vibe.
Completely. You're in Scandinavia, it's freezing, the winter is long and dark, and it can kill you. The soil is rocky.
So you don't get a nice, reliable sun god. You get
You're Odin and Thor. You get gods of war and struggle and fate. You get a mythology where even the gods are going to die at Ragnarok. The environment is harsh, so the spirituality is gritty.
And then you have the Celts, who the source says were obsessed with liminal spaces.
Right. The Celts lived in a world of mist and forests. So their spirituality was all about the boundaries, the edge of the woods, the shift from summer to winter, sacred groves, the other world that was just right there behind a veil.
It really hammers home that idea that nature was the text. If you lived in the woods, your religion looked like trees. If you lived by the sea, it looked like tides.
Exactly. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, if you zoom out, despite all those differences, the source argues they shared the same DNA.
The unifying themes, I thought the most mind-bending one was the concept of time.
Oh, the distinction between linear and cyclical time.
Yeah. We are so wired for linear time today. Start to finish, progress, Q1 to Q4.
That's a very monotheistic and eventually industrial way of seeing the world. We're going somewhere, there's a destination.
But in a nature-based worldview, there is no destination.
Nah, winter always comes back. The sun always returns. You don't defeat night. You endure it until day comes again.
It's a circle or a spiral.
And it changes your ethics. If time is a line, you're worried about the end times, the afterlife, a final judgment. If time is a cycle, you're focused on maintenance, balance, keeping the seasons turning, honoring the ancestors so the line continues.
And speaking of ancestors, that was another huge pillar. It wasn't just nature worship.
No, because in a tribal setting, your ancestors are literally why you're alive. They are the root system. Disconnecting from them would be like a leaf trying to disconnect from its branch. It just doesn't work.
So we have this rich, diverse, global tapestry of traditions, and then the history books turn a page. We hit the section on the shift.
The rise of monotheism, specifically Christianity spreading across Europe.
The source describes this not just as a religious conversion, but as a total rebranding of reality. And honestly, a bit of a hostile takeover of the calendar.
It was incredibly strategic.
Yeah.
You have to remember, you can't just delete a culture overnight. If you march into a village and say,
Hurrah.
hey, no more Winter Solstice Festival, you're going to have a riot on your hands.
Right. It's the darkest night of the year. People are terrified the sun won't come back. They need that celebration.
So the church says, okay, fine, keep the festival. Keep the evergreen trees, that symbol of life in winter. Keep the candles, the feasting. But now we're celebrating the birth of the sun, not the sun.
S-O-N, not S-U-N.
Exactly. That's syncretism. It's efficient. You don't ban the party. You just change the theme.
It reminds me of when a big tech company buys a smaller one. The interface changes, the logo changes.
But the back-end code is still running all the old processes. That's a perfect metaphor. The software of paganism, the rituals, the seasonal markers, the fertility symbols like eggs and bunnies, it kept running in the background. But the interface became Christian.
So, in a way, paganism never really died. It just went undercover.
It went into folklore, into old wives' tales, into superstitions, knocking on wood, throwing salt over your shoulder. That's where the knowledge survived when the temples were torn down.
But then we hit the 19th and 20th centuries, and suddenly the undercover era ends. The source points to the Industrial Revolution as the trigger for a revival. Why then?
Well, just look at the environment. It's the pendulum swinging back. Imagine you're Victorian. You've moved from the farm to a smog-choked city like London. Everything is gray, rigid, mechanized.
You're starving for green, starving for that enchantment we were talking about.
Exactly. You feel disconnected. And that's where you get the romantic poets, the folklore societies, and eventually the birth of modern pagan paths like Druidry and later Wicca. It wasn't just about magic. It was a rejection of the machine.
But the source is really careful here. It makes a distinction between paleo-paganism, the ancient stuff, and neo-paganism, because we can't really go back, Kim.
No, we can't. That's the tragedy of oral traditions. When the Druids were wiped out, they didn't leave a manual. We don't have the sheet music.
So what are modern pagans doing?
They're what we call reconstructionists. They're looking at archaeology, folklore, poetry, and trying to build a working system that feels like the old ways.
It's like trying to rebuild a dinosaur from just a few bones. You know the shape, but you don't know what color it was.
Or what song it sang. But the argument the source makes is, does that matter? If the goal is to connect with nature now, do you need the exact liturgy from 500 BC, or do you just need the intent?
That brings us to the big why now section. Because this isn't just history. The data shows that nature-based spirituality is booming today in the 2020s. We're more technological than ever, yet people are flocking to a belief system that requires you to go stand in the mud.
I think it comes down to three things,
Yeah.
based on the analysis: agency, earth, and trauma.
Okay, let's break those down. Agency first.
Modern paganism is usually non-hierarchical. There's no pope of paganism. There's no central authority telling you what to believe. You build your own practice.
It's DIY spirituality.
Exactly. And for people burnt out on rigid dogma or institutions that failed them, that autonomy is incredibly appealing.
Then you have the earth. I mean, you can't turn on the news without seeing a climate disaster.
Right. We're in an ecological crisis. A theology that says the earth is just a staging ground and we're leaving for heaven feels irresponsible to a lot of people now. A theology that says the earth is sacred, the earth is divine, and you're part of it feels urgent.
It changes the stakes. If the
That's-
river is sacred, you don't pollute it.
Right. It shifts the paradigm from dominion, I own this, to kinship, I am related to this.
And the trauma piece. The
Yeah.
source mentions religious trauma specifically.
Yeah, this is a term we see a lot now. People who felt excluded, judged, or shamed by mainstream institutions, often for things like gender, sexuality, or just for questioning authority, they can find a home here.
It's a system that worships goddesses as well as gods. That has to be a huge draw.
Huge. It balances the masculine and feminine divine, and it often views the body as part of nature, not as a source of sin. That can be incredibly healing.
The source wraps up with this beautiful idea of a living path. It says paganism isn't about believing in magic in a Harry Potter sense. It's about re-enchantment.
Re-enchantment is the perfect word for it. The sociologist Max Weber said modernity was the disenchantment of the world. We analyze everything until the mystery was gone.
The sun is just a ball of gas. The tree is just lumber.
It becomes a dead world, a world of things. And paganism is an attempt to put the mystery back, to realize the mystery never left. We just stopped looking. It's a shift in attention, noticing the seasons, not just as weather, but as a story you are living inside.
It's interesting. We usually end these deep dives with a specific takeaway, a productivity hack, or a new way to think. But this one feels different. It feels like the source is telling us to close the book.
That really is the ultimate point of the text, isn't it? You can read about the history of the solstice all day. You can memorize the names of the Norse pantheon, but that's just academics. It's not paganism.
Paganism is the act of stepping outside.
Right. If you want to understand what your ancestors felt, you don't need a time machine. You have the same moon they looked at, the same changing seasons. The source material is the world itself.
So the challenge for you listening today isn't to go read another article.
No,
Yeah.
it's to go outside. Find a tree in your neighborhood, one you walk past every day, and ignore and just really look at it. Not as landscaping, but as a living thing.
Watch the sunset tonight, not as a pretty backdrop for a photo, but as the cosmic event that dictates all life on this planet.
Ask yourself,
Hmm?
if I lived 2,000 years ago and my survival depended on this landscape, how would I treat it?
And see if the world starts to look a little bit more alive.
That's where the deep dive really begins. Just you and the sky.
I love that. A different kind of homework this week. Thanks for guiding us through all that.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.